In December 2011, the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, or ASPR, issued the 7 Principles of Earned Value Management Tier 2 System Implementation Intent Guide. This guide is primarily used for Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA, countermeasure R&D contracts that have a total acquisition cost greater than $25 million and a technical readiness level of less than 7. This requirement is known as the Tier 2 requirement, while Tier 1 applies to construction and IT contracts and will require full EIA 748 compliance, and Tier 3 applies to countermeasure research and development contracts between $10 million and $25 million, and will require EVM implementation that is consistent with the 7 Principles approach. The guide focuses on the implementation of Tier 2 contracts specifically. The guide is organized by each of the 7 principles, including explanations for each, along with a glossary of terms, a supplemental EVM implementation guideline, and sample EVM documents. The supplemental EVM implementation guideline portion contains recommendations regarding process flows, tools, the necessity to integrate the EVM engine with the accounting system, basic documentation requirements, ranges of implementation costs, recommendations on requirements for support personnel, and use of the 7 principles on Tier 3 programs. Now, let's go through each of the 7 principles in detail. This principle includes development of a work breakdown structure, WBS, and WBS dictionary that includes all of the work scope. This dictionary can be expanded to include work authorization information, such as charge numbers associated with the work, period of performance, the manager who is responsible for the work, and budget associated with the WBS. This information would appear at the lowest level of the WBS at the control account level. This principle focuses on the scheduling requirements. This includes typical attributes, such as network scheduling, horizontal and vertical traceability, forecasting schedule start and complete dates, and critical path analysis. The contract milestones must also be included in the schedule. It is important to note that organizational requirements identifying the control account manager is part of this principle as well. However, no organization breakdown structure or OBS is required, but only recommended. Principle 3 is broken out into 2 sub-principles, with 3A being arguably the most important of the 7 principles. 3A deals with the integration of the work scope, the schedule, and the budget into a performance measurement baseline or PMB. In the BARDA environment, the schedule can either be resource-loaded or the budget can be housed in the cost tool only. Either way, the cost tool and schedule must be linked to ensure cost-schedule integration. From a cost perspective, a control account plan that is time-phased with both direct and indirect dollars must be generated. In addition, undistributed budget and management reserve must be defined and identified. The second sub-principle deals with change control of the baseline. The basic requirement requires that contractual changes be incorporated to the baseline in a timely manner, along with the ability to track all changes via a budget log. Any changes, whether external or internal, must have appropriate documentation justifying the scope, schedule, and budget for the change. This principle deals with the actual cost accumulation in a formal accounting system to be consistent with the way the work is planned and budgeted. A work order or job order coding system must be used to identify costs to the control account and allow summarization through higher levels of the work breakdown structure. The use of estimated actuals is also required for material and subcontractors to ensure that earned value data is not skewed. This principle requires that schedule status and earned value assessment must occur at least monthly. The allowable earned value techniques are discussed as well as the requirements for the use of each. It is important to remember that good earned value management is based on objective assessment that stems from using the appropriate earned value techniques. Percent complete is highly discouraged by BARDA as it is subjective and will most likely not reflect what work has actually been accomplished. This sub-principle deals with the analysis of variance to the plan. The program should have the capability to calculate the cost variance, BCWP, minus actual cost of work performed, ACWP, and the schedule variance, BCWP minus BCWS, at least on a cumulative basis. It is also recommended that current month data be calculated as well. With that said, both Cost Performance Index, BCWP, divided by ACWP, and Schedule Performance Index, BCWP, divided by the BCWS, can be derived for analysis purposes. The second sub-principle discusses the generation and use of an estimate at completion, EAC, based on performance to date and the work remaining to be performed. The EAC should be updated at least on a monthly basis by the Control Account Manager prior to submittal of the EVM report. Performance indices such as To-Complete Performance Index, as well as independent statistical EACs, can then be used to validate the EAC. This principle deals with the ability of the program to effectively use EVM as a management tool, rather than a mere reporting requirement. This is measured primarily by the quality and frequency of ongoing EVM training, the quality of variance analysis, the development and closure of corrective actions resulting from variances, and the ability to accurately estimate costs at completion and estimated completion dates. All of these factors contribute to effective management use of data. For those who are more accustomed to the EVMS guidelines as described in the EIA standard, EIA 748, this table shows a cross-reference between the 7 principles are loosely identified to the 32 guidelines and guideline areas. As you can see, not all of the 32 guidelines are met with the 7 principles. Several of the guidelines are not specifically identified, but could be considered as incorporated by reference. As an example, the indirect cost requirements are incorporated by planning the work with both direct and indirect dollars. Therefore, it is implied that budget, earned value, and actual costs would also include both direct and indirect costs. In summary, the 7 Principles of Tier 2 System Implementation Intent Guide requires the basic elements of earned value and the documentation necessary to demonstrate that earned value is being adequately implemented on Tier 2 programs. It should be noted, the Intent Guide describes what to do and contains little on how to do it. Internal procedural documents should be required to define how a company will implement the guide requirements.